by Gil again, 2 podcasts in a row. We are joined together to do the podcast, and we're just going to go around, talk about the news, Tar Heel news mostly, anything related to UNC basketball. And I don't know if anybody can podcast these days without at least getting an update about their COVID-19 living style and how they're surviving. So Gil, you're here, you're surviving. How you doing?
Yeah, surviving is an accurate term. I think it's challenging. One day you feel like, okay, no problem. And then the next day you could wake up and you just feel like the monotonous of it is weighing down on you. So I think we're all in it together, and, hopefully we're remembering that it is temporary and that we will get through it. But yeah, it's tough, and missing sports for sure. But there's obviously more important things. But, that's the arena that we're going to focus in and talk about as lovers of Carolina basketball, of course.
Yeah, with that what you said about one day to the next is so true, especially with kids. Like, one day it's like I'm ready to strangle or give them all away or lock them outside or something, and the next day, like, they're all playing nice together, and it's like, oh yeah, we should just homeschool our kids and all stay home together all the time. So
it's no different with cats either. I'll tell you.
I'm sure. Yeah, so it's definitely day to day. Yeah, but we are here to talk about Carolina stuff and. No sports. You mentioned that. We'll talk about the Jordan documentary, The Last Dance, a little bit and give our 2 cents. We've had some Carolina news, Cole Anthony declaring transfers, commitments, all kinds of stuff to talk to. So, we just want to thank you guys for sticking with us as a podcast, for listening. Hopefully you're subscribed wherever you're tuning into this podcast. We're everywhere you can find a podcast, Apple Podcasts, Google, Stitcher, YouTube, and we're actually doing this live on YouTube now. We'll see if we get anybody jump in and comment there, but we're just going to go through and kind of talk through the issues. So we're going to start with the most recent from this morning. And as we were talking before we went live here, we were talking about all the topics, all the news, and Gil hadn't mentioned it. So I'm like, did you see the news from this morning? And he's like, what? So we're going to start there. This morning, Jeremiah Francis announced that he was entering the transfer portal and no longer will be a Tar Heel. So we're going to jump right into you, Gil, and give your kind of live thoughts on that, since this is the first you're hearing of it.
Yeah, this is an immediate reaction to that news. Definitely sad to hear that. Like that kid a lot. He's gone through a lot to get to the point where he could be back on the court. You always hate to hear of any player leaving the program. And I don't know, my immediate reaction is it seems like Roy Williams stuck with him. He was injured for his last 2 years of high school, is my understanding. And then, off and on injured this year. And we knew he probably wouldn't play much going into the season, but he ended up earning some playing time there in the middle of the season with all the injuries and the fluctuation in the team. And so it seems like Carolina basketball and Roy Williams and the coaching staff stuck with him through that and gave him the opportunity. So I am a little shocked to hear that, a little disappointed. I think from a player evaluation perspective, we got kind of a thoroughbred coming in Caleb Love. And so you figured that Jeremiah Francis is probably going to be a backup, and maybe he had the Seventh Woods trajectory career in front of him as kind of a career backup point guard at UNC, which there are a lot worse things, but you figured he would be a stable contributor and one of those 4-year guys, maybe that would be a stabilizing force for the program for years to come. So I'm sad to hear that news. I liked his tenacity on the court. And I liked his presence. Saw a couple tweets, and I think I liked a couple tweets, and maybe his parents even liked a couple of my tweets where I was just right in the middle of the season really lifting him up. And it seemed like he had, the good kind of Carolina culture, strong family unit, and you hate to lose that in the program. I will say on the one side, on the other side of things, being someone who's very observant of body types and body styles, I think that he's probably going to struggle with knee issues for his career, just based on what I saw. He's kind of got, inward turned legs and knees, knock-kneed a little bit. And so I think that leads to those issues that he has already had in his career. So I wish him the best, of course. I hope that's not the case, but just kind of witnessing that, I'm like, maybe Carolina, that frees up a spot on the roster and ultimately, might be a blessing in disguise, both for him. You want it to be positive for him as well as for the program. So that's my immediate take on all that.
Yeah, and I was just gonna. I mean, it's a pretty well known story, but just throw that out there in case anybody's listening that doesn't know the story. He was a high school teammate of Sterling Manley, which is where Roy found him first.
Pinkerton, Ohio.
Yeah, and then he committed as a sophomore, I believe it was pretty early on. And I read this morning, I didn't know who else was it, but Ohio State was in on him already. I think West Virginia was the other one, but committed
his
early.
Father played at Ohio State, I believe.
Yep. And so he was committed before the injuries came. It wasn't like we, kind of took a flyer on him or anything. So, he was injured pretty much the entire junior and senior years of his high school. Didn't really play even through AAU. I don't think he played a lot. And so, like you said, Roy stuck with him. And I did see some comments or some quotes from his dad this morning that, very appreciative of Roy to do that, and he did the right thing and that kind of thing. But all the comments from them is just they didn't think they were going to get the playing time that they wanted. And he said he was kind of looking at all levels of basketball. Didn't really matter about location. He just wanted to make sure he was able to help a team. So he obviously, and I thought too, like he could be a backup this year. There should be some minutes there for him. Maybe not the amount he wanted or wished or, whatever. But and I think, my first reaction was like, is he too injured? Like, is he kind of giving up on basketball and he's going to go back home and be closer to home? But, he's still going to try to play basketball. So that's not the case. And so after hearing that, I kind of think of the championship teams we've had and the backup point guards we've had. We've always had a steady kind of senior point guard behind, the starter. Behind Ty Lawson, we had Bobby Frazier. We had Nate Britt on that 17 championship. I think
Stillman White. Stillman White was still on that team as well. I just watched that recent replay.
He was on all the teams in that decade, right? Yeah. So to me, it's like, oh, he could have been that guy. He could have been that, junior, senior backup point guard, just steady, when we make a run. But yeah, like you said, if a guy's leaving because he doesn't think he's going to get the playing time, and it may have been the case because once we got a little bit healthier towards the end of the season, he wasn't getting playing time, and we know how worried Roy was about that he could play in his knees. They rested him kind of whenever they could and stuff. So, we wish the kid the best, and hopefully he finds a place that he is healthy and he can play and contribute and have the career that he wants. But
absolutely, I think all of us as Carolina basketball fans will continue to be a Jeremiah Francis fan. Even regardless. Same with Brandon Huffman. I'll pull for him as long as he's not playing Carolina.
Yeah, and so we can transfer I guess transfer is the right word there. I didn't necessarily mean to use that, but transfer over to Brandon Huffman. And news coming out earlier this week. I don't remember all the days are the same. So he transferred to Jacksonville State. I believe he was from Florida, so I think it's kind of going home for him. Kind of playing time. We got two bigs coming in next year. And I kind of called this one, I don't know when it was the beginning of the season or something. I was like, if somebody transfers, it's going to be Brandon Huffman because, we're going to have so much depth down low. So I maybe it's a little bit of clickbait, but I kind of titled this podcast "A Transfer Problem." Does Carolina have a transfer problem now? And I'll even pose to you: is this the end of it? We have another big that's not going to see much playing time in Walker Miller. Could he go play at a smaller school and get some playing time? Because now he's getting to be a junior, senior, and it's like, you're running out of time to really get the playing time that you have. I feel like there was another person I was thinking of that could possibly transfer, but I'm not thinking about it right now. So what do you think, Gil?
Interesting point that you make, and it is more transfers that we've seen here in the last 3 years now than over like the previous 10 years under the Roy Williams tenure. And just in general with Carolina basketball, there has not been a ton of transfers. I think it's more a state of college basketball than it is more of a microcosm issue at Carolina specifically. That's my first take on this, is that we're just seeing it's maybe a product of our culture and how we're like an Instagram culture and we want, instant gratification. And so players that aren't getting the playing time that they want are maybe feeling more empowered to transfer and go see if they can find it elsewhere, find a better situation for themselves. So I think that's more what it is. You had Landers Nolly, who was, on the all freshman team for Virginia Tech, also transferred to Memphis this week. So I don't think it's an isolated issue of just Carolina basketball. I think, we have a great coaching staff that develops players, and we develop young men, not only just as basketball players. And I think that the parents and the players that really value that, in addition to the fact that they might have the opportunity to, win ACC titles, win NCAA titles, and prepare themselves for potentially an NBA career. If you want that, you can come to Carolina. If if you're in the state of Brandon Huffman and you just want more playing time, I think it makes sense for him. He's been at Carolina. He's had that experience, and he wanted more playing time, and he can certainly get it with his size and stature at a smaller school. I had to look up where Jacksonville State was. I wasn't sure if it was North Carolina, Jacksonville, but okay, back down to Florida. So I think it makes sense for him. I don't sense from Walker Miller. I feel like he didn't come in with a lot of hype, but maybe I'm wrong. I feel like he's kind of a blue steel guy that has earned valuable minutes because he works hard and he has talent. All those guys do. So I don't sense that would be, likely the scenario for him, but I don't know. We don't know what's going on behind the scenes. And when I find out Jeremiah Francis is transferring, so you just don't know. But that's an interesting point that you raised. But I think it's a greater issue in college basketball that we're going to see more transfers. It's just kind of more commonplace now. And I know that there's the potential for them to change the rules on that transfers might not have to sit out a year, which I have mixed feelings about, because then I feel like players can very easily just try and be like, oh, I'm going to, load up on this team or whatever. I don't know. I feel kind of weird about that. But, you want what's right for the players too. You want them to get into the right situation.
Right. And yeah, you speak of that rule change. I believe it's in May. The committee has to vote on whether they're going to approve. And it would be a one-time transfer without sitting out. So it's not like they could do it every year. And they're the same guys anyway. Yeah. But it would definitely affect, everybody. And we say as Carolina, like, oh, we don't have that many transfers. It wouldn't affect us. Roy gets the right guys. But even before that rule now has been implemented, we saw, Seventh Woods last year. Now we got these two guys this year. And I think the other guy I was thinking of was Sterling Manley. Actually, we mentioned him before. But with his injuries and now the new big guys coming in, is he gonna, and it, like you said, it's what's your mindset? Are you okay coming in, being a backup, getting, fighting for minutes, or do you want playing time? And especially Brandon Robinson, I don't have a problem with him transferring. He came, he gave Huffman, gave 3 years of, entertainment for us on the sideline. And by all accounts, he worked his rear end off in practice and tried to contribute, and he just didn't get the minutes that he wanted. And now you can't blame a guy for one season wanting to play basketball, possibly showing what he's got so that he can go overseas or, whatever it is.
There's only so many years that you can, lace them up and wear a jersey in an organized sport, you know what I mean? And if you want to get the playing time, I absolutely can relate and understand that as an athlete. So I think it makes sense for him. And you did call that one. I'll give you credit there. You saw that one coming. You saw the writing on the wall. I think I've seen the writing on the wall closer to the end of the season and started hearing some rumblings and maybe some speculation from other podcasts I listened to. But I thought that going into the season, and I remember from my player projection podcast at the start of the season, I kind of expected more out of him this year. I thought that we might see some Joel James development in him and see some crucial minutes and maybe a little bit more touch in the mid-range game. But it was mostly just power dunks and spot minutes and garbage time for the most part.
Yeah, and it's interesting the way basketball's come to. Like Roy has always wanted to, but he's kind of admitted, the guys like Walker Miller and Brandon Huffman couldn't guard, when the switches. There's so much pick and roll, they couldn't guard the guys on the perimeter to where it affects that. So before we move past transfers, we have gotten some comments here just and questions on this stuff. So Jake Pettit obviously hadn't heard it either. He's like, really, as far as the Jeremiah Francis transfer. Joseph Connor says, do y'all think this means we go after another transfer? So I'll let you go first before I give my 2 cents.
So there's two things at play. One, I think that the coaching staff was not surprised by Brandon Huffman, and they've been pursuing Kerwin Walton, who would not be a transfer, but a recruit coming in the 2020 class. And he's supposed to make an announcement Saturday, I believe. And signs are indicating, that there's likelihood that Carolina may land him, which would be great. We could use the extra depth on the wing, and he's supposed to be a shooter, which Carolina could certainly use after the poor shooting this past season. There's a guy out of Santa Clara that you were telling me about in the last podcast, and his name is escaping me. And I was trying to do the math with the scholarships, and it seemed like we were out because he would be a transfer, not a grad transfer. And he would require a scholarship, and he would require the year sitting out. As far as I know, I don't know, you'd have to tell me about that voting thing that's happening in May. Would that pertain to this coming season or the following season?
I think they want to get, if it gets approved, it would go in as soon, but I don't, as soon as possible. But I that'd probably be something they have to vote on too, as whether it would be this year or not. But that guy actually has already committed to Notre Dame, so we are out of him.
Okay.
And that's kind of what I was going to say. You know, Brandon Huffman opened a spot for, we thought, Kerwin Walton, if he, you know, if everybody's right and he comes to North Carolina. Now this one would open up another one, but I don't know. Again, I'm not that I am a recruiting guru. I don't keep on it nearly as like a lot of people do. I don't have sources and all that kind of stuff. So as far as I know, I don't know that they're in on anybody else or that there's, you know, a transfer out there that they're really looking at. So, you know,
I'm sure the coaching staff, sorry to cut in there. So I'm sure the coaching staff is definitely doing their job and on top of things. And, you know, I'm not sure how much they knew ahead of time before we did about Jeremiah Francis, but I'm sure that they're, you know, looking out for every possible, you know, no stone unturned, whether it's via transfer, grad transfer, or, you know, another recruit that may still be available. That would be my thoughts.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, there definitely could be. I don't know that. So we did get one other comment here from Eric House. He said, I get a kid wants playing time. However, backup and role player at North Carolina is not terrible. Fight for your spot. If you think you're that good, win a championship, and who cares where you're on the depth chart. And personally, I completely agree with Eric here. If when I was in high school or college, you know, whatever, if I had a chance to, you know, walk on, if I could be a manager or, you know, whatever in the North Carolina program, like I'd jump at it and I'd, you know, put my whole heart in it and everything. But as somebody that has the talent that these kids do, like you want to play, like, of course you want to be on a winning team. You want to win championships. You want to play at the highest level, but you also want to play. Like you don't want to go sit on a bench somewhere. And again, you know, we don't know that Jeremiah Francis really isn't a prospect for the pros, you know, right now. Maybe he gets really healthy and he improves and he, you know, makes an NBA team one time. That'd be awesome. But he's really looking at maybe a few years overseas after college, if he can get that. So while you can play, you want to play. That's, again, my kind of 2 cents on it. But I know I would jump at the chance of North Carolina. I don't know if you got more to say on that, but
I'm 100% with you. Nothing really else to add. I absolutely get Eric's point there for sure, and understand exactly what you said and where you're coming from. And who knows who's whispering in his ear, you know, parents. And maybe there is a pull to come closer to home with this current situation. So it'll be interesting to see where he may land. You know, so
right.
that could be part of it.
I think the level he goes to too will kind of tell us. Like if he goes to the Ohio State, then it's like he probably wanted to be closer to home. If he goes down to a mid-major, goes down to a D2 school, something like that, you know, it's, you know, from all the quotes, there's been quotes from Roy coming out already. You know, there's not hard feelings on either side. Again, I don't know how surprised, you know, the staff was, but you know, they're kind of in support of him. It does leave a little bit to discuss about the depth of our point guard next year. You know, we know we're stacked in the bigs. It looked like we were okay in the point guard here. We had a steady backup. You know, we thought Jeremiah Francis would be that. It kind of pulls maybe Leaky to the point guard a little bit, but we're so thin on the wing spot that, you know, we kind of thought Leaky would get all the minutes he wants at the 3 spot. So I don't know what you think about, you know, depth there. Obviously, Kerwin Walton helps, more of a 2 guard. RJ can play point, but we kind of saw him next to Caleb Love in the backcourt. So again, it fluctuates there a little bit, and we know how much point guard play Roy loves to have all those extras and stuff. So again, I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
I agree with everything you just said. I do think it hurts us there, actually. And I would expect on the depth chart at this moment, my thought would be Leaky Black as our backup playing the point. And he did play it a fair amount this past season, so that's not the end of the world. But like you said, then it does thin us out at the wing. If we do get Kerwin Walton, that helps improve that depth. And hopefully, you know, Roy's out there recruiting. I'm sure he is, you know, recruiting from home out there. And he's probably looking to plug those holes, and maybe we end up with someone that we didn't expect that we were going to end up getting, and it ends up working out in the end. But like you said, yeah, I think it makes us a little thinner.
Yeah, so we just got one more comment here from Charles Diggs. It says, guys, we need players. We need 10 or 11 guys that can play UNC basketball with the best wing player in the nation. So not really a question there. I don't know if there's much we need to add to that, but yeah, it'll be interesting. Of course, the whole thing, like you said, Roy recruiting from home on Zoom. I think him in person is a big benefit to his recruiting style, and also getting guys to Chapel Hill is a big pull to guys, which neither of those can happen. Obviously the transfers kind of know that going into it right now, grad transfers, anything like that. So again, I don't know what's out there. We don't need to kind of beat that horse. So let's move on to something a little bit more positive, or a lot more positive. Is we recently got a commitment from Styles. I believe you said his first name. I'm
Dontrez Styles, I believe, is his name.
Styles. So the number one.
What a cool name, number one.
Right, it is for sure. But also the number one recruit out of North Carolina for the 2021 class. So we're pulling in those North Carolina guys. We're getting on the board for 2021. People, guys can kind of see what the class will start to look like. Somebody we can build around. Again, I'm not a recruiting guru, so I don't have a lot of his stats or what he's like. I believe he's kind of an undersized 4.
I was going to say, I think he's like 6'8" or something like that.
Yeah, I've heard. I think
athletic,
6'8".
Yeah,
but not really a shooter. So I don't know. Again, I don't know where that mix is between.
I think he's going to have to develop his back to the basket kind of game. And I'm with you. I'm not a guru on the recruiting scene either. But the fact that he's number one in the state is a good thing. And you want North Carolina, obviously, to land those recruits. He's from Kinston, North Carolina. Carolina's had a lot of success getting excellent basketball players from that area. Unfortunately, they lost out on the last one from that area, Brandon Ingram, who committed to Duke after a long recruitment from UNC. So glad to get Dontrez Styles. That's for 2021. So he'll help bring more depth into that wing / small forward. I'm sure he'll bring some good things. And I think from what I've heard, there's some areas in his game that he'll want to develop, but he's the number one player in the state. So
right.
You're happy to hear that for sure.
And I think that's part of the reason why I don't get into recruiting as much. And you were kind of just stating right there is like, he's still got a senior year. Normally he would have an AAU season this summer, then he'd have a senior year, and then he'd get to come in and play summer pickup with Carolina guys and stuff like that. Obviously AAU is probably totally out of the picture this summer. And I heard, I want to say it was the Inside Carolina, Inside Carolina, not Carolina Insider Pod, but the Inside Carolina Pod. We're talking about his commitment too, and they felt like he could have jumped up the rankings as well. Not that rankings matter, but with the improvements and his play this summer. So it's one thing with recruiting you have to remember, like he's still got a whole year. He doesn't have to come in and play North Carolina basketball. He doesn't have to play against ACC guys this year. He can still develop and we'll kind of see what kind of player he is. But yeah, like you said, obviously there's a reason Roy is going after him, and he's the number one player in the state and stuff like that. So, definitely good news. I don't know where he is nationally on the rankings. I just, I heard he was number one in the state. So a big get for the Tar Heels. And then we go from that kind of into the obvious news we knew it. And maybe that's why we're holding it till last, but Cole Anthony does declare for the NBA draft. No big surprise there. I don't know what your comments or if you got anything to say about
Expected.
Yeah.
The only thing I would say, kind of going back to, I was thinking about what you were talking about, the fact that there's not an AAU season this summer for players in the high school and the prep scene. But also, I was just thinking that you alluded to also the Carolina pickup games with, players in the pros and alumni coming in. And I think those really help develop the Carolina players that are in the system. And that's not happening this summer, unless maybe it is happening behind closed doors. We'll see how things progress. And it is only April, so it's not the summer. But those kind of things do help players progress a lot. And so that'll be interesting if that stunts any development. Hopefully not. But we're all assuming that there will be a season next year, which is still kind of within question. But in regards to Cole Anthony, we all wanted it to turn out better, for him individually in a Carolina uniform, for the team collectively in a Carolina uniform. I mean, if you look at the stats, his numbers are as good as any freshman that we've had for a long time, almost dating to Tyler Hansborough. Unfortunately, he just missed that big chunk of time due to the knee injury, the meniscus tear, and I think that obviously created a stunt in the development of the team collectively, and then took him a couple games to get back into the rhythm and the flow of the team once he did come back. So obviously not the season that we were expecting out of the team collectively or for him individually, but he's a Carolina for life. We love him. We're going to wish him the best. I think he will have a successful pro career, and he'll be surrounded with probably a bit more talent for sure, once he gets to a team. So not surprised to hear that decision, just kind of waiting to hear that decision, and finally we got it confirmed.
Right. And yeah, there was a lot of people talking, like when Brandon Huffman transferred, like, oh, there's that scholarship open, Cole can come back and be on the team. And to me, I almost see it as he probably wanted to come back. A lot of these guys, college is a lot of fun, and even with the hard season we had, he's only said good things and been a good teammate, and I think he enjoyed his time at North Carolina. But we can transfer into the Jordan documentary here, kind of like when he was a junior and Dean Smith's like, you got to go, like you got to go to like, how does Cole Anthony not go to the pros when you're a top even 10 pick? He was projected top 5, and if he slipped a little bit, but how do you not go when you're a top 10 pick? It may be Roy, and Roy, I know way before Cole Anthony announced, he was on some interview or somewhere, maybe it might have been his Zoom with his Zoom or press conference with his beard that went so famous. But someone kind of asked him about Cole, and he said, no, Cole's gone. Like, he's probably telling Cole, like, you can't come back, like, you got to go. So.
Yeah, I think there was like a very, very tiny percentage of me that thought, well, if he hadn't made the announcement, maybe he is going to come back. We could say that any player that comes back will develop and get better and improve potentially their draft stock. They could also get hurt and hurt their draft stock. So there's no guarantee there, which is why the coaching staff, and has done so for a long time, like you said, dating back to the early 80s, encourages those players. There's just too much money involved. They can't make that money up in the course of their lifetime. 1 year at X million dollars, while you have that earning potential, while you have that athletic ability, is the reason why you have to go. As fans of the University of North Carolina and college basketball in general, I love to see those players develop over a few years and stick for 3 years. I mean, think about how great it was that we had Michael Jordan at Carolina for 3 years versus just being a one and done. You know what I mean? That's amazing. And we'll shift, I suppose, to that documentary here in a moment. And I was thinking about that when you were talking about Roy Williams not being able to go out and recruit, and the value of bringing those recruits to campus is one of the big sells, of course. But the one thing that Carolina has going for it is the fact that this Last Dance, with no other sports really to compete for it, you'll have the NFL draft starting tonight. But other than that, everyone's tuning in for the most part and reliving or getting to see for the first time, for those in the younger generation, how amazing of an athlete Michael Jordan was. And that does nothing but help Carolina.
Yeah, and especially with the first episode there, where they flashed back to his Carolina days, and I know there's a lot of talk of him riding the bicycle around campus, and
that was awesome footage.
In the old well, and him inside the gyms and stuff like that. Yeah, like you said, it definitely helps. Maybe it doesn't even help, but it doesn't hurt the recruiting for sure. That everybody's talking about how Dean Smith, made him go pro, and how, he talks about his time at Carolina and the development, and all, Roy Williams quotes in there. I think I heard somebody say that Roy Williams was trending during this because of his quotes about how he doesn't shut it off and all that. So yeah, it definitely doesn't hurt. Again, I said this to you offline before we started, but there's so much talk about the Last Dance. I don't know that there's a lot I would add. Obviously, we talk about the North Carolina stuff in there. And like you said too, just to be able to see him play again, when I was starting to get to the impressionable age was kind of towards the end of his Bulls career, and we didn't have cable TV, so I didn't get to see a lot of NBA games then. They didn't have these Sunday ABC games and stuff, so we rarely saw him. So when it's true though, when you saw him live, like you were watching him, and it was just you're waiting for whatever he was going to do in that game, and catching the highlights and stuff like that, to see that stuff play again. And for this younger generation, like you said, that never saw him, to be able to see his game action, I think it brings back a lot to people.
I am so thankful that I was of the impressionable age, right in the thick of all of it. His Carolina career was more just before, but right when I was at the impressionable age was when he started to come on the scene, and I knew it right away. I was, a young kid, and he had this appeal to this generation of people like myself, where he played the game differently. And he played the game so beautifully, but so strong, and just unlike, I mean, if you watch that footage, he went up against the greatest players of all time at that time and made them look normal, because that's how extraordinary he was, athletically gifted and just such a hard worker. And I think that a lot of people maybe took that for granted, if you did live during that era, was how hard of a worker he was. You don't just get to be the greatest of all time by just sheer, athletic ability alone. There's a lot of hard work that goes into it. So I appreciated seeing that side of things as well. But I'm happy to relive it. I had a friend who I was chatting about. I was like, "Hey, are you watching?" He's like, "I lived it when it happened." I'm like, "I'm happy to relive it, to be honest with you, because it was the glory days of basketball, in my humble opinion, particularly for the NBA." So seeing him come into the league and, take that team, and it's so different now where these players form these super teams and whatever. There's definitely this development of the Bulls as like a band, like a musical band, getting better together. That's what the Bulls did. And of course, then there was some turnover between the first three-peat and then the second three-peat. But again, those players developed and worked together as a team. And you forget that, maybe I forgot that a little bit, was just how great of a team player MJ was. It wasn't just his ability to score, but he was an exceptional defender, and probably should have won more Defensive Player of the Year awards than he did. An excellent passer of the ball. And then, of course, you got Scottie Pippen, who for some part of his career was maybe undervalued, but, quite an exceptional basketball player himself. So getting to relive those Bulls glory days, which was my number one team at the time. And it wasn't just like, oh, you're a front runner because you're a Bulls fan. It was just anyone of my age that appreciated basketball had to have some sort of affinity for Michael Jordan. I don't know too many around my age that just like, oh, I can't stand him. I mean, he was just too good. But I mean, I was just enthralled, as most of us in my generation were, with his ability and the Bulls. And you saw some of those scenes in The Last Dance of like when they went to Paris, this almost Beatles like fame. And just it was something that everyone was really pretty much hyped into.
Yeah, for sure. It's incredible. Thankfully, we got that to look forward to, as you said, with no sports going here. Obviously, the draft is starting, so people will be tuning into that. But every week, getting to relive that a little bit more for a couple hours. So I think we've hit everything. Did we miss any Carolina news? Anything else that needs to be brought up?
I think we hit it all. So hopefully we'll get the announcement of Kerwin Walton commitment over the weekend. That would be stellar news for Carolina basketball recruiting in the class of 2020. I think we covered all the bases of who's coming in and who's going out. Sad to hear the news of Jeremiah Francis, but wish him the best, wish Huffman the best, and Cole Anthony the best. And we'll see what the 2020 Heels can do.
Absolutely. And so in the off season, we do one a month. So sometime in May, we don't have it planned. We don't really know when it's going to happen yet. Maybe I'll have to wait until Gil hits me up again and say, "Hey, we need the podcast." But we also need to get Blake on here to
too bored over here, man. I had to do something.
Well, I can send you a couple of kids and it'll keep you moving. But I know Blake wants to come on and talk starting lineups as well. So possibly after, if we get this announcement from Kerwin, we'll have to jump on and talk about that as well. So we will see you in April, or May. What month is it? In May sometime. Make sure you are subscribed wherever you're taking this podcast in so that you won't miss it. And we just thank you guys for sticking with us, and we continue to kind of live out this COVID-19 and look forward to next season. But Blake, thanks for coming on. And until next time, go Heels.
Go Heels.